At some point in our lives, most of us fall into the trap of wishing we had done something earlier, whether it was making revision resources or paying attention in class. Dwelling on our past actions is something we all do, and more often than not, we start to go down a rabbit hole and we soon have a whole list of things we wish we had done. We spend time thinking about things we simply cannot change, and this often leaves us feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and demotivated. With 1 month to go before GCSE exams, please try and stop thinking about the things you simply do not have the power to change or control. I know it's easier said than done, so here is the ultimate guide to what you should be doing 4 weeks before your GCSE exams. Firstly, I want you guys to remember that it is not too late to start. You might be getting 4s or 5s in your subjects right now, but I've heard so many success stories where people have managed to turn around their grades in a matter of weeks, so if they can do it, so can you. Right now, I want you to grab a piece of paper or open up a Google spreadsheet and write down the subjects that you are doing, ranking them from the ones you would be most scared of doing if I was to tell you your exam was tomorrow to the easiest one. Then I want you to list out the topics of the subject you put at the top of the list in the order from hardest to easiest. After that, you need to do the same for the rest of your subjects, and that should give you a good idea of what your weakest areas are and what you need to tackle straight away. Next, I want you to open up your laptop and look up some past papers. Now, you're going to do this for each subject, and for each question, I want you to note down which topic it comes from. I personally went through about 8 to 10 years of past papers per subject, and that gave me a pretty good idea of which topics came up most frequently. For example, for CIE IGCSE Biology Paper 4, the topics that almost always came up were chapters 6, 7, 9, 10, 15, and 16. So from this shortened list, my advice would be to start with the one that you find most challenging and go from there. Then, if you still have time before your exam after you've done that, go back to your original list and start with the next hardest topic from that one. The next thing I want to move on to is how you should be revising. So by now, you should be doing full past papers. You've probably heard this a billion times, but honestly, past papers are a godsend. In my actual GCSE exams last year, 3 questions from past papers in both my physics and chemistry multiple choice exams came up in the real thing, and they were worded exactly the same, so that really just shows how important past papers are. I've also had a few questions asking how many past papers you should be doing, and my advice is honestly just to do as many as you can with the time you have left. It's never bad to be over-prepared, but make sure you're not neglecting your other subjects. Also, please use mark schemes. Oftentimes, if you don't include specific keywords in science subjects, no matter how much they want to, examiners cannot give you the marks if you don't include those specific words. Also, in the practical or alternative to practical paper for science, they often ask you to draw graphs, at least for CIE, and they're only worth 4 marks. At school, we always had to write titles, but in the mark scheme, you don't get a mark for it. So if you spend ages coming up with a brilliant title in the exam, unfortunately, you won't even get a mark for it. The next thing I want to address is timing. In my experience, this is the hardest part, especially for essay-based subjects like English and history. Hence, the best way I've found to make sure you go into the exam feeling confident is to do a lot of time practice. Try giving yourself less time than you would have in the actual exam. For example, if your English paper is 2 hours, give yourself 1 hour and 45 minutes to do the paper. If you're finding it really difficult to do it in the given time, then maybe try giving yourself 2 minutes less every time you do that paper. The fourth method is to try blurting. If you're like me and you like to switch up the way you revise after a while, then you should definitely try this out. I got this revision strategy from Unjaded Jade, and it has honestly been so helpful. Essentially, it uses active recall, and you basically write down everything you can remember about a specific topic without looking at your notes. You can set yourself a timer or just keep writing until you can't remember anything else. After that, use your notes or other revision resources to fill in the parts that you forgot in a different colored pen or highlight it. Personally, I do it for specific subtopics rather than entire chapters because otherwise I find it too intimidating, and it's also harder to figure out what I missed if I make the scope too broad. My final piece of advice of how you should be revising is to not go over your notes. There has been tons of research demonstrating that highlighting and rereading notes tricks our brains into thinking that we're doing something effective and useful, but studies have shown that the retention rate of people who do this is much lower than people who use active methods of learning, like using flashcards or attempting practice questions. Essentially, by blurting, answering questions, or teaching something to a friend forces you to drag information out of your brain, which helps consolidate what you've learned and helps you remember the information for longer periods of time. Next, I want to talk a little bit about motivation. Knowing your why is really crucial to helping you stay motivated even when you're really stressed out. So essentially, there are two types of motivation: extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is when you do something for its inherent satisfaction rather than for a separable consequence like pressure or a reward. On the other hand, extrinsic motivation is doing something because of outside influences or causes, such as avoiding a punishment or receiving a reward. Essentially, intrinsic motivation comes from within and extrinsic motivation comes from the outside. Now you might be thinking, why should I care? Well, essentially, intrinsic motivation is really effective for achieving long-term goals, for example, your GCSEs. Basically, if you're intrinsically motivated, whenever you complete a task that helps you become one step closer to your goal, for example, getting an 8 or a 9, you will feel a sense of self-fulfillment. Now, on the other hand, extrinsic motivation may be useful in some situations, but it eventually leads to burnout and loses effectiveness over a period of time. Nowadays, so much emphasis is placed on the end result of an exam, but what we need to do is shift our focus back to enjoying the process of learning rather than being so fixated on the end result. In our society, unfortunately, we are judged by our grades, so yes, they do matter. But when you're learning something, please try and prioritize the learning process. Think about how lucky you are to be in a position where you get to learn. Fall in love with learning again. Lastly, make sure you have a good system to avoid burnout. Knowing your why and having a motive for why you want to do your exams is important, but motivation is a feeling. It is fleeting. We often tell ourselves that the people society deem as successful are just really motivated, but the truth is, no one can be motivated all of the time. The real secret lies in discipline and setting up sustainable systems. Having a routine or a series of habits that you can fall back on when you feel low or demotivated is key to helping you stay productive. In my experience, the hardest part about the process of GCSEs was the fact that the exams were spread out over the course of 2 months, and making sure that I avoided being burnt out played a crucial role in why I did well. So do your best to wake up at the same time every day. Eat healthy, work out, and make a to-do list if that's something that helps you. Also, please don't neglect your mental health. If you're feeling stressed, go for a walk, play music that hypes you up, try doing yoga or a guided meditation. Just please make sure that you are taking care of yourselves.